This is coffee number 5. I'm your host, Lara Schmoisman. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to coffee number 5. Today, I was thinking as I was growing up, I tried to do so many things in my life. You know my story a little bit. I flirted with so many different disciplines in my life, and I learned from all of them. But also, I failed. And I fail a lot. And I wouldn't be where I am without failing so many times and without learning so many times. And like I always say, it doesn't matter how many times you fall. It's like how graciously you get up and you keep going. And the thing is, at some point in your life, and this is something I think they never teach us before. You don't go to school for this. They don't teach you just to look at the big picture. Look at the big game, because it's not one part of your life. It's look at the distance, see what can I do, what I can leave a legacy. It's not even about money. It's about the long game. So today I invited Dorie Clark, Harvard Business Review writer, also multiple books, and the long
game.
The long game. It's here. For a second, I lost it, but you guys see that this is live and I'm not cheating. And sometimes this happens. Those words, they're like, poof. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Lara, thank you so much. Really great to be here with you.
So the long game, how did it come to you? I mean, how did you figure out?
Yes, well, I think a lot of us, frankly, have had similar feelings because, you know, pre-pandemic, it just seemed like myself and everyone I knew was in this perennial state of rushing around. You know, I kept hearing from people, oh, I wish I just had a minute to breathe. I wish I had a minute to think. And we were just pushing. And so much of it was about just getting things done that it seemed like nobody was ever really stopping to lift your head up and consider, well, what do I want to be doing? Or am I doing the right things? Or what's the direction I'm heading in? And of course, with the pandemic, in some ways, it forced us to slow down, but I think not necessarily in the right ways, because we still were doing so much short-term thinking. You know, for many of us, you try to make a long-term plan and it's like, nope, sorry, you know, oh, we're going to go back to the office in July. I mean, September, I mean, January, you know, it just all blew up. And so it was all just very focused on short-term concerns and considerations. And I think that's not really healthy. There's something to be said for short-term thinking. I mean, you need to adapt and pivot for sure, but that can't be all that we do, because some of the most important outcomes, you know, whether it's building a successful business or, you know, creating meaningful relationships, those are things fundamentally that take time, they take investment, and they take being able to play the long game successfully. So I wanted to write a book to really help people reorient toward a longer range of strategic thinking.
Right. Lately, I mean, there's this very popular book, probably you know it too, The Infinite Game. What's the difference between an infinite game, Simon Sinek, and the long game, Dorie Clark?
Well, you know, if I can attempt to characterize Simon's book, I mean, what he is talking about is the idea, you know, there's this is based off of work years ago by psychologist. I'm not even sure, you know, what the person was, but there was a researcher who talked about the difference between finite and infinite games. And of course, you know, the finite game has, you know, clear rules, you know, like chess, you win the game, you lose the game, whatever. But a lot of things are not like chess, right?
Yeah.
The game of life, quote unquote. Well, what does it mean to win it? Is it, you know, oh, you know, you have the most money, you win? I mean, that's not the most sophisticated understanding of what it is to have a meaningful life. And so therefore we need to treat that differently. And that's kind of in the category of an infinite game. How do we keep it interesting? How do we keep it going back and forth? And so I think that's a really fantastic concept and a really important idea to think about. In Simon's book, he primarily is talking about businesses and large-scale organizations. He's talking about Microsoft and Apple. He's talking about the US Army and going to war and things like that. And I think that is amazing and really interesting. But I really wanted to apply these concepts the question of how do you actually have a career, a life that you are happy at the end of it with the outcomes, I wanted to bring it down to a personal level and really try to provide people with some frameworks so that we could look at ourselves better and hopefully make the choices today that will make tomorrow better and easier for ourselves.
So I just got a freebie that you have down there in your website that we're going to give the link for people to go and get it, of course. And I just want to talk a little bit about that framework and what can we do for people to get on the game and in the long game. I see that there is, I was talking today, actually this morning, with a client. So she was telling me, I want to do sales. And I say, I understand you want to do sales, but what's your strategy? What's your strategy to do sales in 3 months? And what's your strategy in 6 months? And what's your strategy in 1 year? Doesn't mean that things won't change, because sometimes we need to pivot. And COVID was our more recent experience that everyone had to pivot, and we keep pivoting. But at the same time, you need to know what you're going to do. Otherwise, your time going to get wasted in so many directions if you don't have a strategy. And also, you're never going to be measuring what worked and what doesn't.
Right on. I'm so glad that you raised that, Lara, because it's really true. Some people say, oh, well, things change. And so why should I be thinking long term? Why should I be planning long term? And it's true. It would be a bad thing if you created, let's say, a career plan for yourself when you were 20 years old, and then you just stuck to it no matter what for the next 30 years. That is not going to work. Industries change, jobs get created, jobs disappear. You have to change.
We change.
Exactly. So it's certainly true that being stuck to a plan is a bad idea, but having the plan is actually really powerful. There was an interesting study that was done years ago that showed that that entrepreneurs or small business owners who had a business plan were actually much more successful than those who didn't. But the interesting part is that most of them didn't follow the business plan. That's, you'd think like, oh, well, they had the plan, they followed it. Not necessarily. It was the act of doing the thinking and doing the research to create the plan that made them better off, because they had enough information that they could be smart and nimble when they needed to. But having the long-term plan was a really valuable exercise, even if you didn't follow it.
I always work with 4 pillars, and my audience know this, that they are about time, team, budget, and knowledge. If you don't have those pillars, and what you were talking about, having a business plan means that you have the knowledge.
Yes, absolutely. So true.
And if you don't have the knowledge, then how can you execute? So what tips and tricks or hacks can we give our audience today to plan that long game, if for their business or even for their personal brand? Because now we have a lot of people, they have a personal brand and they don't realize that they need to treat it as a business.
Yes, definitely. So there's a lot of different possibilities that we can be following. And, let me just name a few here. So one important starting point, this is actually, I devoted the first third of the long game to this because I think it's so critical, is the idea of creating more white space in your life and in your business. Because one of the biggest...
What is a white space?
Yeah, exactly. Well, good question. Picture your calendar, whether it's a physical calendar, whether it is an online calendar. If you have a million back-to-back meetings, let's say you're on Google, you're on Outlook, it's just these swaths of, blue, 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 and there's nothing white. All you're doing is racing from one thing to the next. There's not time for reflection. There's not even time to follow up on the things you said you were going to do. And yet so many of us pathologically just create so many meetings and obligations. We have no white space to think and to process it. So I think the first step that I talk to people about is getting really merciless about guarding their time for their most important work and being able to slough off a lot of other obligations. Because when you hear people say, I literally just don't have time to think, often they're not exaggerating. That's actually true. And it's a problem because we can't even begin to do strategic thinking if we don't allow ourselves a moment to do it. I'm curious, Lara, you seem like a very busy person. How do you create white space for yourself? Or do you carve out time to think or time to strategize?
I do actually every day until when my team leaves, I leave. I make sure that everyone leaves, and then I'm the last one to leave always, but I take some time off. And at that time I use it either cooking or reading or whatever, but I need to disconnect for a little bit. Then if I need to go back to work, that's fine. And it's my thing, it's my job, it's my passion, and I'm okay with it. But you need those breaks, otherwise it's burnt out. And I think that's one of the ways that you decompress.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I love what you're saying because it's actually true. Sometimes people will often raise the objection, but I just don't have time to go off and sit and think and meditate. And, I get it, right? People are really busy. The good news about strategic thinking is that you don't have to actually, sit there like a monk and meditate. This is the kind of thing that if you are cooking, if you are at the gym, that you can multitask in that way. Your body might be occupied, but your brain is not. And it's just a question of.
It's totally true. Like the best ideas come in the shower.
Yes. Yeah. There's actually research about it. In my book, Stand Out, I talked about a study that was done by a Dutch researcher named Ap Dijksterhuis, the wonderful name of Ap Dijksterhuis.
Really easy.
Yes. And he talked about the fact that there actually is scientific rationale that you are likely to have more insights because your physical body is occupied, but you're doing a rote thing. It's not like it takes a lot of concentration to be in the shower, like what the drill is. So it's occupying a little bit of your brain, but not too much of your brain. And that actually is literally just the right amount of distraction that your brain is able to make creative connections.
Let me ask you a question. What do you do with your white space? And also, do you recommend that people in that white space schedule things? Because I see a lot of people that are saying, I block this time for me to write. And I always find that when I try to block time to write, it never works.
Yes. Yeah. It really varies by person. And so it's important to test out different ways that are most effective for you. I mean, some people are really good at, I write every morning between 7 and 9 a.m. And, for other people, that's the complete wrong strategy. So I think a little experimentation is important. But yeah, what do you do with white space once you have it? In my particular case, I think that one of the most important things that I have tried to implement in my schedule is essentially taking a concept that has been written about by Paul Graham, who was the founder of the Y Combinator sort of startup incubator. He talked about he has a famous essay where he talks about manager time and maker time. Manager time is, for managers that are trying to help advance other people. Basically, their whole day is just meeting, phone call. That's their life because they need to manage the project and keep things moving. If you're a maker, in his world, that's a software coder, but it can be any kind of a maker. You basically need large blocks of unstructured time in order to get stuff done, to be able to concentrate on it. What I have discovered is that if you are an entrepreneur, you're both. You're both a maker and a manager.
You absolutely are.
Yes. And so the innovation that I've tried to do is in my own schedule, I have manager days and maker days. So in a given week, I'll have, a day where it's just, a million meetings back to back. But then what that allows me to do is have another day that's completely unstructured so I can actually do meaningful work on a project that moves the business forward.
In my case, I need to have a combination of days, like have blocks in the middle that I need some time because I have a large team. So in those moments is where I say, okay, I thought about this. So I want to talk to this person. And not every conversation needs to be so structured. Not every conversation needs to have a meeting put in the calendar. Some meetings need to be spontaneous. And that's where I found out that there are a lot of people just trying to make a meeting for everything. When I used to work in agencies, That's what drove me crazy, was meeting. And there's so many meetings that they were unnecessary, or there's so many people invited to the meeting that it was unnecessary.
Yeah, that's very true. Absolutely. So once you have your block of time, once you have a little bit of white space, then the question becomes, what do you do with it? How do you think about it? And so one of the concepts that I talk about in the long game is what I call thinking in waves. And what I mean by that is that I have seen, and I'd be curious, Lara, about your experience working with entrepreneurs and your community of followers. But what I often see in the people that I know and work with is people get frustrated sometimes because they're like, I'm working so hard and I'm just not making progress. Why isn't it working? And almost always, I mean, they're not wrong. They are working hard. That is true. But the problem is that as humans, we tend to continue working hard at the things that we already know how to do and we're already good at. And they need to be shifting into a new phase of doing other different things. And they often resist doing it. So that's one of my observations. What have you seen?
What I've seen is the same thing, but it's about not being able to delegate and not being able to work with others, but also it's about being all over the place. If you're trying to do everything and you're trying to do your social media, you're trying to do, I'm talking marketing because that's what I know, but if you're trying to do your SEO, you're trying to do everything, it's like, what are you really good at? What is your time more valuable at?
Yes, absolutely. It's always such an important question to answer. And so one of the things that I believe is that we can't focus on one thing to the exclusion of everything else forever. That would be a bad move. But if we actually want to move our businesses forward, it is a good idea to focus on certain things and put our energy and our intensity into them for a while and actually make that choice rather than, as you said, being scattered all over the place. So you need the courage to do it.
And that comes from creating that plan or that strategy. It's like, what's my role in my business? Because you need to have a role. You cannot be doing absolutely everything. And mostly when your business grows. So how do you, in this long game, how do you keep growing? Because in the long game is not being staying in the same place.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Moving. So how do you get to that point that in growth? Because at some point you start and then at some point you need to move, and it's not a comfortable place many times to move.
Right. No, it's absolutely true. And we may want to sort of stay in a place because it's comfortable. Another element that I often see in the entrepreneurs that I know and work with is one of the things that can be most demoralizing, I guess you could say, about playing the long game is that if you have a good, a worthy goal, a long-term goal that you're pursuing, the truth is there's often quite a distance between where you are now and where that goal is. And in between here and there, it can feel like you're in this dark tunnel. Like, okay, I am disoriented. I don't know if I'm making any progress. I have no idea how long this tunnel is. And, am I a mile away? Am I 10 feet away? Am I 1,000 miles away from it? I just don't know. And that's the place where it becomes really easy for a lot of people to give up or to quit or to grab onto the next shiny object and say, well, this isn't working. I'll do this other thing. When actually, sometimes, oftentimes the right answer is no, you just have to keep going a little longer with the thing you've been doing because it takes time to build a following or it takes time to build an audience.
Absolutely. Everything takes time, but also it takes measurement. How do you measure it? You need to decide what are your metrics.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think a critical thing is identifying your metrics beforehand.
Yes.
Because otherwise it's like, I don't know if it's working. And you can really get discouraged quickly. But if you know that for everybody else in your field, it took 2 years to get X amount of revenue or X number of customers, you don't have to panic 3 months in if you're not there yet. Oh, okay, this is something, hopefully it'll be faster than 2 years, but it probably won't be 3 months, so I just keep going.
Do you think a lot of people are not thinking in the long game, and even though they know, oh, that it took them 2 years, but I'll do it faster, or it happened to me faster, do you think people start the game with that belief?
I think that what is most common is that people actually don't do the research at all, and so they have no idea, and they make assumptions about things. There's a great story that I recount.
Yes,
in the
please. I love
game.
Stories.
Oh yes, well, so in the 2018 letter to Amazon shareholders, Jeff Bezos tells this story about a friend of his who hired a handstand coach for yoga. And this handstand coach, apparently had a little game that he liked to do where he asked people, how long do you think it takes to become good at doing a yoga handstand if you practice every day? And the most common answer that he would get was maybe 2 weeks of practice every day, and I should be able to do it. And you're laughing. You're like, nope. And you are correct. It takes 6 months of practice. And so you can absolutely imagine a situation where, let's say somebody's like, yeah, I want to do a yoga handstand, and they're practicing for a month, 2 months, and they still can't do it. If in their head, if they had never researched it, if they'd never asked an expert, if they'd never looked into it, in their head, they're like, oh my God, I've been doing this twice as long as it should take me. I've been doing this 4 times as long as it should take me. I'm just not good at this. I should just give up. When the truth is, they just haven't been doing it long enough, but they have no idea because they didn't research it. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like that. We kind of barrel in without the proper information.
Absolutely. I talk to so many people that they, and this happen even when you hire someone, that you have a concept and having ideas and concepts it's a wonderful thing. But if you don't do your homework, and even if you send, like in my case, to do a website, but you didn't do the research, you didn't compare notes, you just went with someone because it was a recommendation, maybe it wasn't the best fit for you. You didn't know how to do it. And that happens in all the parts of your life.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So I'm curious, Lara, when it comes to you personally, how do you think about the long game, or how do you think about long-term thinking in your own business?
I believe in, of course, that if you don't make money in a business, it's a hobby. Let's put it clear. You need to make money in your business.
Very true.
So I don't do expensive hobbies, but I do believe in reinventing, I'm stuck today. Reinvesting?
Yes, reinvesting.
Yes, I did it. In your own business and in your people. That I believe that if I grow, my team needs to grow with me. And also never put all your eggs in one basket.
Amen to that. Yes.
So that's how I see the long game, because I'm evolving as a person, and I don't want to be doing always the same.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really important. And I also especially like the point about, making sure we don't put all our eggs in one basket. I think that there's often a sort of, push for entrepreneurs where it's like, no, go all in, that's your thing. And of course that's true, right? I mean, you can't be successful if you're just sort of, dilly-dallying around. You have to work, you have to focus. But it doesn't mean that it literally is the only thing you're doing and you don't have anything else going on. One of the things that I talk about in the long game is, famously, Google has 20% time for their employees. Now, asterisk, lots of Google employees don't actually take this. They don't actually use it. But nonetheless, there's this concept at Google that you should spend about 20% of your time on discretionary activities that are outside the scope of your job, but you're doing it to kind of explore, to sort of play around and, learn some new stuff, invent some new stuff. That's how Gmail was invented, on 20% time. I think this is a fantastic idea, not just for Google employees. I think every entrepreneur should be embracing 20% time, because if we want to stay ahead of the curve, if we want to make sure that we don't get outmoded, that the world isn't changing around us, we need to stay sharp, and we need to practice and invent new things and explore ideas.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be if where I am today if I wouldn't be curious. I mean, I don't know many women my age and with my background that they're as technologically savvy as I am. And it's because I just was curious. If I was working with a developer, I need to understand the tools. I wasn't just, so if I will know that, I won't do that, I wouldn't be able to progress or I wouldn't be able to be owning today a marketing agency. But
absolutely.
So you need to keep yourself on your toes. You can never forget, and also think what I want to be doing in 5 years. I mean, I can change my mind, but how do I see myself having grandkids and doing what I'm doing now? Because as an entrepreneur, I don't see myself stop working because I love to work and I love to create and do new things. But it's the long game, like you say, the long game starts now, opening those opportunities for the future.
Yes, that's exactly right. I love that. And it's true. I mean, if we want to be creating a great future for ourselves when we're 60, when we're 80, whatever it is, that's not something we can magically gin up when we're 59. We need to start laying the groundwork now.
Yeah, it's the same that I will tell my teenager son in college, you need to decide. And I think that that's a lot of problem with our education system. We teach them they need to make a decision now. And you don't need to make a decision now. Now, life will take you places. You just need to be open to the opportunities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I agree with you. I think so many people feel a lot of pressure. They almost feel bad about themselves if they don't know the answer. But the truth is, a large percentage of the people who claim to know the answer are really just making things up, or they just, they've sort of glommed onto an idea that sounds good, but may not be right. I think if we have a lot of intellectual humility, it's valuable for us because it helps us retain our flexibility. There's a concept that I talk about in the long game called optimize for interesting. And what I mean by that is, we may not know what our passion is, in life or whatever, our calling, but we certainly know what we find interesting. And as long as we just keep moving in that direction, it enables us to keep moving in a positive direction. If you don't like it, fine, change. That's okay. No law against that. But
flexibility is important.
That's right. But presumably, if you've been moving toward what you find more interesting, you keep getting a more and more refined sense of where you want to go.
But I feel like a lot of people are holding tight in what they have. A lot of people, they're holding to their job or their trade or their degree. Like, for example, when I started school, there wasn't digital didn't exist. They didn't exist at all. So I did something else. But later on, I pivot and I move. So I had to be able to learn other skills. But if I would have held on to my degree, I don't know what I would be today.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, the good news for me is I was a philosophy major, so there just wasn't a lot to hold on to. But nonetheless, I
thought about taking a philosophy major.
Cool, great minds, great minds. But I think that people are not wrong, of course, to want to have some kind of sense of stability, but it doesn't have to be the only way of looking at the world, because the truth is the things that we often think are stable are not. And so, when many people are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, of course, as you know, Lara, a lot of the cultural narrative is like, oh, you got to take the leap. You've got to jump in. You've got to cut the ties and start your business. And, I'm always a fan of, what, don't do that. Keep your day job, practice on the side, figure out if people even want your thing, and then you can start building it. But, don't be foolish about it. And I think similarly, if we're looking to make a shift in our career or a shift in our product or service offering, it's okay. You don't have to burn the boats. You can test it. You can test it in small and subtle ways and figure it out. And once you have product market fit, that's when you can jump in a little bit more thoroughly. But it doesn't have to feel risky, and it doesn't have to be risky.
But at the same time, that you need to know and how you feel about this, because a lot of people, they don't realize that they need to, if they're going to be making this switch, always, or even if you have time or on the side or whatever it is, there's an investment that in whatever you can call it time, you can call it talent, whatever, but there is an investment. And you need to understand that it's not going to be in 2 days that investment is going to come back, or maybe you lose it because you made a mistake and you need to adjust. So how do you suggest that people prepare themselves for that part of the game?
Yeah, well, I think it's right. I mean, I'll put an asterisk on it in the sense that even opportunities that turn out to be dead ends often are interesting learning experiences that you can derive a lot of value from. So it might feel like a waste of time, or, I wasted that. But actually the knowledge that you've gained, for the importance of the knowledge of like, well, that didn't work, or actually I didn't like that, can be just as valuable because it prevents you from going down wrong paths, even worse wrong paths in the future. So I think that's an important piece. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of incredible. I'm always an advocate, as I'm sure you are, of making sure that we're surrounding ourselves with the right people so that we can, learn from them and actually see what it really takes. And I just continue to be impressed. I mean, I count myself among this. For many years, I honestly didn't really understand what it meant to work hard. I thought I worked hard, but I was not surrounding myself with people who actually did. And once I saw what it looked like, I'm like, oh God, okay, I guess I need to step it up. And so similarly, making sure that we are around the right people and we understand what commitment looks like is so valuable. I was out literally last night with a colleague of mine who is a very successful keynote speaker. And she was, I know that over the past few years, she had developed this sort of strategy of keeping in touch with speakers bureaus and being very assiduous about it. And so I was asking her about it last night. I'm like, hey, how many speakers bureaus do you keep in touch with? And I was thinking, 10, 20, maybe 30. She says 300 speakers bureaus that she reaches out to all of them on a quarterly basis to touch base, to update them on her progress. It's like, okay, if we want to know why she is a more successful speaker than almost anybody else, that's why.
Amazing. Amazing. Before we go, Dorie, what's your long game?
So my long game, I have a number of different goals. One of them is over the course of the next decade or so, I would like to rise to the level in my work that hopefully I am considered among the top handful of business thinkers in the world. I would like my work to be well known enough and impactful enough that, if you asked a decent smattering of people to name a few, top business thinkers that they know and like, hopefully my name would almost always be on that list. That's one thing I'm aspiring to. The other one, which I kind of chronicle this journey a little bit in the long game, is I decided in 2016 that I was going to create a 10-year goal for myself. This is my 20% time, that I was going to write a musical that ended up on Broadway. So I'm continuing on that path. I'm aiming for the 2026 season.
Part of that. I'm a big fan of musicals. So
fantastic.
I want to hear it first.
All right. Amazing. We will totally have to keep in touch about that.
What else?
Those are the big ones. I mean, obviously, I'd like my love life to be in better shape, but I only have half the control over that.
Yeah, well, it happens when it needs to happen.
That's right.
Sure. Well, Dorie, thank you so much for being here. You're definitely on my list of top thinkers.
Thank you, Lara. It's so wonderful to get a chance to connect with you here, and I so appreciate the chance to talk with you.
And to you guys, thank you so much for being here today. And I'll see you next week with more coffee number 5. It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao.